Hey there, and welcome back to my author channel where we talk about books, writing, especially those of the self-published memoir variety. And of course, as always, if you want to pick up a copy of my most recently published memoir, Fishing for More, you can do so at my website with the link below or at online retailers such as Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So give that some thought. And of course, if you enjoy this video, consider hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and sticking around because I'll probably do some more of this. Today's video was just a fun little deal where I came up with 10 signs or reasons that you may or probably were born to be a memoirist and write memoir. I came up with the first 10 things off the top of my head that made me feel like that was probably my path. Maybe they resonate with you, maybe they don't, but at least hopefully they'll be fun or funny. Reason number 1, you remember all of those little things that none of your family and friends do. So if you're that person, and for me this happens a lot, where you'll be reminiscing about a situation that occurred 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, and you can remember the color of shirt somebody was wearing and a certain thing they said and a certain way that they said it, and everybody's like, how the heck do you remember all that stuff? I don't know, maybe we're just wired differently. Maybe that's a weird part of our brain and our memory, but if you can do that, you might be able to turn it into a memoir. Reason number 2, you are a natural observer of events and people. If you're that type of person that loves to sit at a picnic table out at the theme park or the zoo when everybody else is out doing their thing and having fun, and just kind of watch them go by and coming up with goofy names and stories behind why they're there and where they're coming from. An airport's a popular place to do this too. I always like to predict where I think that person's coming from and where they're going to and what their occupation is. If that's a trait that you have, a personality characteristic that you have, that may be a sign that you're well suited to write a book about such things. Reason number 3, you're always looking for the deeper meaning of things. Now, a good memoir strikes a balance between narrative and story and things happening, as well as the introspective side of things, to try to put together the pattern of life and why those things happened, and whether you believe in fate or not, if they happen for a reason, or just what the takeaway is and why a certain person did a certain thing, and show some semblance of personal growth over the course of your story. That maybe you saw something a certain way or a person a certain way at the start, and then by the end of it, you go, oh, you know what, they weren't so bad after all, they were just trying to help out. It's those sorts of things that can make for a great memoir. Number 4, you have a very lively inner dialogue. Now, if you're the type of person that talks to yourself very often, or sees things or remembers things and basically starts telling a story to yourself in your head, it might be a good idea to actually get that out on paper or a computer electronically and turn that into a book as well. Number 5, you always relate to the straight man or the narrator in a book or a movie or a sitcom or something along those lines. Think, for example, Arrested Development, Michael. There's all kinds of craziness going on around him, and yet somehow he is just trying to hold it together, and you kind of think of him as like the focal point of the story that everything else revolves around. And you're also kind of seeing and hearing the story through his perspective, that first person perspective. If you're the type of person that watches a show like that and heavily relates to that character as opposed to one of the other characters, this kind of falls along with everything else, where you're an observer of people and events, and you're always looking for the deeper meaning of things, and you're trying to put all the pieces together. And of everybody in that family, you might be the one that's actually going to write the book about the whole crazy thing when it's all over. Reason number 6, and this is very specific, your toys and cartoons were not real enough when you were a kid. Now, obviously memoir, being nonfiction, is a very specific genre. It doesn't lend itself to quite the creative whims that a fiction book would, because you have to tell events as they happened. You have liberties to be creative with your words, but not with the events. Some people don't appreciate this. Some people want an escape when they read a book and they just want to read a crazy, wild fiction story. Whereas other people like me are constantly complaining, even as a child, that their Batman Batcopter is not realistic enough to pass for the real thing, aside from the fact that it's a miniature version of that thing. When I was trying to draw things, I used to draw a lot as a kid, and I always wanted to try to draw everything exactly perfect real. I wanted somebody to be able to look at the drawing and think it was a photograph, which was an absurd expectation. But the point being, I was drawn to the realism of things, and that's, for me, I do enjoy a fiction story once in a while, as an escape, certainly, but there's something about it that falls flat if I don't feel like it's real enough and I can't feel like I can relate to it. And maybe that just makes me a natural memoir reader and writer, and perhaps you too. And number 7, leaning off of number 6, a good movie becomes a great movie when you realize that it was based on a true story. Now again, don't mind a good escape and a good creative whatever once in a while, but there is something about watching a movie that already got your attention, and then after the fact finding out it was either all true or based on a true story, and you go, oh my god, that was something that really happened. I don't know why that has so much extra potency in my brain and potentially other people's brains, but it does. And that's the reason why I think personal memoirs can be so powerful, because you know these things happen to a person, unless they're a lying piece of, in which case you shouldn't read what they're writing anyway. Number 8, you live through a transformative life experience. Now, this one's not exactly a requirement, because I think you can still write a great memoir if you don't have a wild, crazy story, but there should be some sort of character arc and some sort of personal growth involved. It can be on the very intense level, like near-death experiences, or other extreme examples like life in concentration camps or something like that, or living through a war, or traversing Mount Everest or something along those lines. But it can also be something more middle of the road. Like for me, for example, in my book, Fishing for More, fishing was a huge part of my life. It was a big theme of mine growing up. And then for a long time, I didn't really do a lot of fishing, and I kind of got away from nature, and I became an investment analyst, and I was doing the responsible thing and working at a well-paying job. And slowly things started to kind of fall apart for me, health-wise, mental health-wise, physical, and somehow slowly I started to reconnect with nature, and eventually got to a place where I decided, why am I spending 90% of my life chasing that 10% of what I really want, which is fishing and being in the outdoors, when I could flip it around and turn that into a lifestyle and a career? And that's what I did. And that was my transformative experience. It's perhaps a little crazier and bolder than some people, but it's certainly not fighting World War II or climbing Mount Everest or anything like that. But hopefully, if told well, and there's some lessons learned and some reflection and introspection involved, it can be a good story. I guess you'll have to be the judge of that if you read it. Number 9, especially if you're writing a family memoir, your family and or friends are a real bunch of characters. Now, I can't necessarily say that in my book that anybody does anything too wild and crazy. I think they're fantastic people, and hopefully people can relate to them and enjoy them and find them likable in the book. But if you have one of those families where everybody, including yourself, is always saying, wow, you guys are a real bunch of characters, and everybody's just so unique and does very eccentric, wild, crazy things, and crazy, bizarre events happen to you all the time, perhaps you should consider putting that in a book and writing a memoir about that, if of course you can get them to sign off on it. And number 10, you just really enjoy the challenge of finding the exact perfect turn of phrase to explain a situation, event, or a feeling and make somebody else feel like they were there. And this is what I think really, truly, honestly makes a great memoir. Again, the events of the life may or may not be the most riveting thing in the world, but if you can find a way to write the story so that the reader feels the way you felt when those events were taking place in your life, you've accomplished something. And I think you're going to have a reader that is wanting and yearning for more. And for my money, that's the whole point of the thing, the whole reason of memoir writing and reading. And that's why I'm going to leave it there at number 10. So if you've got a story to tell and you've been thinking about it and you've been holding back and you're not sure if anybody cares, as I said before, it is a busy, noisy world, and perhaps not everybody's watching, but somebody certainly is.